invite Dr. Richard Francis. Dr. Francis, you heard us, so many Indians speak about water supply. We have seen the evolution of India in the context of water sector reforms. Now, what is your advice to make sure that this initiative that Orissa, Malakapur and few other states have taken gets sustained and scaled up in an accelerated way by 2030, which is our SDG? Over to you, Dr. Richard Francis. Dr. Richard, are you there? I can't hear you.
No, we still can't hear you, Mr. Richard.
Can you, no, you need to mute and unmute, try it again.
Microphone.
Yeah.
How does that?
This is
how can that? So thank you again. Many thanks. Thanks to Chari for teasing us with the 1949 information about 24/7. And we thought we'd started it in 2001 too, with the Change Management Forum. Sustainability is my quick chance to do at the end of this fascinating study. And thank you for all the other speakers. Having started off the 24/7 thing again in about 2002, Karnataka, 3 towns, fantastic achievement, all credit to Veolia and the government of Karnataka. It was a good project, it was inclusive, it was getting to the slums, it was showing it was achievable and that there was improved health benefits. And if anybody needs to see some scientific data, here are some good studies showing how much reduced diarrhea risk was in a sophisticated research study. The reduction of E. coli and the greater impact of key hygiene behaviours when we get continuous water supply at proper pressure, potable, clean. This is our goal. And now all credit to Odisha. They have done so much work so fast as any private sector that I've ever done. The systems are there, the taps are there, connected to middle-income houses and to low-income houses as well. Really low income, really inclusive, it is good. They have done impressive setting up of DMAs, automatic chlorine monitoring and dosing, pressure management, standby generation, customer water quality testing, remote app-based control, as we've heard from PS. It is good. My concern in all of this is sustainability. And I've had this privilege as an academic and consultant to research and work with over 100 utilities in over 60 countries around the world. And this is my way of trying to encapsulate the challenge I now see coming. And from Greek mythology, there is a man called Sisyphus, the ex-king or the king of Corinth, who was condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a mountain every day for his transgressions. And at the end of the day, it rolled back down on him. And this little sequence of slides is to try and suggest the challenge which comes to utilities. Once you've made the impressive construction, you can get things going up the hill. The boulder can start going up using CapEx, using technology, engineering systems and approaches. It starts getting better. But just as Mahendra from Suez told us a moment ago, unless we do the O&M right from the beginning, the construction is not enough. And the boulder gets up a small hill and then gets stuck on a plateau somehow. And it gets stuck there with poor quality water for the people who get it, with producer capture of the utility very often, i.e. the staff seem to get more benefits than the customers, or what we could call a just enough utility to stop being closed down and the poor are still queuing at 5 AM at the standposts. This stuckness, stasis, seems to happen until a chief minister, a donor, managing director, decides to make a real difference, and they start off on the journey again. And this journey is critical to not only include the capital expenditure and the technology, but to customer engagement. And we've heard from Odisha also about the customer engagement, which is really impressive. And it's by these efforts that we start getting the boulder up again and start towards sustainable services. But it's still very vulnerable, this boulder. If we lose sight of things, even having used management systems and approaches, without the political commitment, as we've heard already this evening, the pressure to keep it there goes, and one by one, these other benefits seem to vanish. Our boulder comes down again and we start all over. And sadly, India has had these experiences, as well as the success stories we've been talking about this evening. Odisha and the Jalsatis and customer engagement is a really good sign. They are doing so much and can do so much more, particularly when it gets towards charging for water, because that's when we then see the next set of challenges in that debt collection in a utility can almost be as big a challenge as water supply and leakage management. Because you could say in any political system, there is a half-life of the political leaders' interests. The attention span goes, and then what happens? We are back at our problem. And I suggest in this slide that to support political commitment, one of the techniques around the world which has made a difference is using economic regulators, somebody to be in between the government and the service provider. And they are there in effect to protect the service provider, to make sure they can get the revenues they need to maintain the service long term, whether it's through a tariff-based revenue or through ongoing government commitment. But somebody semi-independent may need to be there. I'm advised by Chari not to say too much of this. In India, the power sector has not been a wonderful advertisement for economic regulation, but global practices, it works in many places. And that's a way of supporting this. A colleague once asked, do you mean there's no resting place halfway up the mountain where we can all relax? No. Once you go for sustainable 24/7 for everybody, it is a never-ending struggle for the entity to keep it there. I can give one set of evidence for this. My own country, England, I've converted all these annual investments into investments per person, capex per person, over 100 years, and converted it to rupee equivalents at purchasing power parity. So the numbers up the side are ongoing capex per person per year. You can see that as my country began to get the push to get everybody connected, it got to the 600 rupees per person per year, today's prices. It then, of course, dipped in the World War. It was getting up again. It got up to the 1200. And at that stage, government thought they'd achieved it. They'd done the job. Interest began to pass away. And you can see the investment trending down again to about 1986-7. So my government then found a particular solution. It's not right for everybody. And that was privatization. Now they privatized it, but they also brought in the regulator. And it's almost the regulator is more important because, as Mahendra's been describing, each contract has its own constraints. And it is the regulator who sets the constraints and resets them, in this case, every 5 years, to keep on pushing up the mountainside, to keep on maintaining the benefits. And so seeing it happen in India, there are challenges to your technology, which I understand CPHEO will be addressing in its revised standards. We described aspects of acoustic loggers to start capturing leakage. Leakage is an amazing challenge to maintain 24/7 and not to lose that. I could ask why you need elevated service reservoirs. They make good advertisement places or billboards, but are they actually giving us what we need in terms of economic pressure management? As a commitment, as a comment on that, the minimum service level required in my country is 1 bar. in order to get customers what they want, water supply to the second story if it has to be, but to control the pressure, to control the leakage. There is no other way to minimize leakage. Different ways of sustaining technology, asset management planning will become critical for the longer term. Digital leak management, the coming thing, active leak detection, pressure management, condition monitoring, etc. I think maybe even each state should have an innovation lab to bring in new ideas. I think with respect, you've got a bit stuck in old ways of doing things and the world has changed around you. Sustaining customer engagement, utterly critical. The Jalsatis are there, but as soon as we start bringing in tariffs, where people do have to pay for their water, and I believe from my experience, it is required to get at least O&M, ideally O&M and capital maintenance recovered from within the customer base. And there is a concept some people use, I call it analog prepaid water meters, to enable low-income people to get water supply, but to enable us to control their payment. This is the concept of a lockable water meter, which anybody who is officially empowered has the special key and locking device and can give a supply pause if people are not able to pay all the time. At some stage, you have to manage this, not to go to disconnections. We want to avoid that, but we have to manage leakage, we have to manage consumption, and charging with the meters is perhaps the best way. In the example from Suez in Johannesburg, water consumption went from 66 cubic meters per household per month to 10. That was with electronic prepaid meters. They tend to be a bit unsustainable. But this system widely used in North America or the Caribbean, where you can simply, if the people aren't able to pay for a while, the Jalsati perhaps could lock it until people can pay again. Very simple technology, an analog prepaid meter, customer focused. Again, I would come back to tariffs, as I don't know any other way which will sustainably support utility, and recommend automatic annual indexation of tariffs. If you don't do that, we are lost. If you wait to politicians to approve it 5 years on, it is lost. And so I then say, sustaining the system through regulating, giving the information, having this intermediary between the service provider and government, who can do the detailed work which government doesn't have time to ensure that KPIs are being met and that asset management is being achieved, and this to protect the service provider. This is where regulators come. More important to protect the service provider even than the customer, as long as the customer forum is there, as long as the customer engagement is there. So thank you very much. That's my challenge to sustainability. Debt collection becomes as big a challenge as leakage management, but you are doing well. Over to you, Chari.
Thank you, Richard. I think the key message coming out from this is we need an intermediary to keep moving up or stay, and his recommendation is to have water regulator.